Hi guys and gals, Greg Howe, S9 Radio. Thanks for tuning in and tagging along. I think I'll title this episode as a resto mod. Now this gets a little interesting. This is a brand new in the box, new old stock, Browning Golden Eagle Mark 4A. Unmolested, right out of the box. Been sitting in a shop forever, had a little water damage on the box, so they never sold it. And a collector picked it up, and he sent it to me for some audio enhancement mods. Now, I'm not into mods at all. The only mods I like are the ones you've seen me tearing out in the golden screwdriver videos. So being as this transmitter is almost a half century old, and worse yet, it sat in a box with no use, probably the worst thing you can do for electrolytic capacitors. I'm going to start out taking a baseline reading, just the way it came out of the box with the stock 776 microphone. And I will also be using an audio signal generator. And I'll go ahead and sweep the transmitter, looking at the frequency response in an audio spectrum analyzer. And then I'm going to go through and recap the transmitter, being as it's almost 50 years old, 48 to be exact. I'm going to replace this can with the newer style firecracker capacitor, same values and whatnot, and then hit the audio capacitors. I'm going to leave the rest of the radio alone. I'm just going to do things that affect the audio circuit. And then I will take another, we'll call it a baseline plus new capacitors reading, and then the audio mods will start. I've got a couple places that I do some things. Whether I'm going to get into really pushing the frequency response of this transformer remains to be seen. I just don't know. There are some things to manipulate the frequency response of this. Whether or not it'll need it, I don't know. Anyways, once again, stay tuned. Let's see what we can get out of one of these things. I think we're going to see about 300 to 3,000 hertz and a pretty flat response curve. And I'm hoping to bring it down to about 100 hertz and keep that response curve somewhat flat, not having it falling off into Never Never Land. I'm not too worried about the high frequencies. They tend to pass quite easily, and might even be a little on the bright side. We'll see. Actually, I'm told this transmitter is a little on the bright side, and that's probably due to some aging electrolytic capacitors that have perhaps dried out and gone out of specification. So once again, that's a good reason for the baseline reading. The owner tells me friends say this sounds a little bit tinny, even with the stock 776 microphone, which tend to be the exact opposite, a little on the seem to favor the low frequency response. So interesting. Anyways, once again, stay tuned. Let's have a look at the transmit frequency response. I've got the signal generator starting out at 0 hertz. It's coming out of the sub-audible range. There's 300 hertz. There's a second harmonic, third harmonic, and higher order harmonics. Now, the general frequency bandwidth for communications equipment is 300 to 3,000 hertz. This is our fundamental frequency, just went past 1,000 hertz. And as the 2,000 hertz signal approaches 3,000, I expect the amplitude to drop off. It does. There's 4,000 hertz, 5,000 hertz, 6,000 hertz, and it's pretty much gone. And that's just fine, as I'm concerned with improving the low frequency response. For those of you that might have been paying attention, it came out of the sub-audible range about 150 hertz. Amplitude was way down, about 175 hertz. It became very noticeable, but the amplitude was still a little low. So what I'm going to be shooting for is a frequency response. It starts at about 75 hertz. I realize that's beyond the capacity of most receivers, but starting at 75 hertz, if I'm able to go that low, should get me near full amplitude at 100 hertz and really give it some good, strong, low-end reinforcement. Something that's not always achievable. The modulation transformers in tube gear are generally the dictator. If you're lucky enough to have a stand core audio transformer in your old vintage tube gear, you're probably in pretty good shape. A lot of the early Browning stuff ran stand core magnetics, and they lend themselves to high fidelity audio in communications equipment. As mentioned, this is a TECO transformer. And although I own a fair amount of Browning gear that utilizes both stand core and TECO magnetics, I have never felt compelled to do any audio expansion. I believe they sound great box stock. One of my favorite things to do is get out there with a stock unamplified banana mic and a transmitter full of good tubes and just blow people away with the audio. The comments are nonstop. You can literally hear their jaw dropping. What are you running, man? That thing sounds great. You know, it's these newbie transistor sister people that have never heard a tube radio. And so anyways, stay tuned. Part 2, I'm going to recap the audio chain in the transmitter, and then I'm going to recap the entire radio as it needs it. And we'll see where we're at. I'll do some frequency sweeps, and then we'll go from there. Once again, I'm not into modifications. Stephen, the owner, is a good client and an avid collector. So I'm kind of bending the rules a little for him, but everything will be reversible. I'm not going to be drilling any holes. As a matter of fact, if I do switch to a stand core modulation transformer, I'm sure the footprint will be the same. It'll bolt right in. The size will actually probably be a tiny bit smaller. I like to drive the audio transformers hard and really get that good mutual coupling for the low frequency response. You know, it's kind of like a speaker. If you want good bass response, you're going to have to, you know, give that woofer some power, unlike a tweeter. And the same thing holds true with the modulation transformer in just about any tube transmitter. The best way to get low frequency response is drive them right up to saturation. It's something a lot of engineers don't. It's something almost every audio engineer that's involved in vacuum tube design does. I was lucky. My first year in college, they were still teaching vacuum tube technology, and we had to use a slide rule. We weren't allowed to use calculators. They were an unfair advantage for the rich kids that could afford those $500 Texas Instrument SR51 scientific notation calculators and whatnot. So anyways, stay tuned. I have no idea. I know it's going to sound better. I don't know how much better. I've got big audio racks of professional radio station gear behind me, but once again, the Brownies just don't need that. So let's see what we can do with a stock radio and just a couple tweaks. Catch you later. Greg Howe, S9 Radio.